It began with a silence so heavy it felt alive. A silence that settled over the Galactic Council chamber like a dark fog, wrapping itself around the polished floors and cold holographic stars. Every member species sat frozen in their seats as the final vote dimmed in the air, their glowing crystals fading one by one, each soft flicker marking another world turning its back on a burning colony far beyond their borders. No one spoke, no one even met another's eyes, and in that quiet shame, the distress signal from the doomed planet blinked off their screens as if it had never existed. Somewhere in that same moment, millions of lives screamed into the void with no one left to hear them, their hopes smothered under layers of polite words and political caution. The galaxy had made its choice, and it chose to look away. But far from that shining council hall, far from the soft lights and soft excuses, another place woke up under the cover of Earth's night, a deep chamber hidden beneath miles of rock, steel, and history. Its walls held scars from old wars and secrets older than the council itself, and for years it had slept without voices, without movement, without purpose. Then the alien distress call, ignored by the entire galaxy, hit the first Terran relay like a hammer striking ancient iron, forcing long-dormant systems to flare awake in bursts of cold blue light. Screens flickered, air hummed, and men and women stepped out of the shadows as if they had been waiting for this moment, their faces calm, their eyes sharp, no panic, just a heavy understanding that something sacred had been broken. In the center of the room, a map bloomed in holographic fire, showing a single world surrounded by hostile fleets, surrounded by betrayal. For a long breath, no one moved. They didn't need speeches, they didn't need orders. They had all seen this before in another age when humanity had been too weak to act, forced to watch a different world die while the galaxy stood aside. That memory still lived in them, a wound that never closed, and seeing it repeat now made something old rise inside them like a cold storm. One officer stepped forward and touched the screen, his voice low but steady as Earth servers locked onto the dying world's coordinates. The words he spoke carried the weight of an entire species that refused to abandon the helpless ever again. "Wake the Black Fleet." And in the deep dark beyond the moon, silent warships opened their eyes. The Black Fleet did not come alive with noise. It woke like a giant remembering how to breathe, silent and slow, drifting out from behind the shadowed edge of the moon. In the darkness, their hulls looked less like metal and more like pieces of night torn into the shape of warships. No markings, no lights, only the faint shimmer of heat slipping across their armor. Inside the command decks, crews moved with a quiet purpose, hands gliding over controls they had trained on for years but prayed they would never use, their faces lit by cold blue displays showing the dying world they were racing to save. Every heartbeat in that room carried the weight of an old promise, a vow carved into humanity long ago, that no world would scream alone while Earth still existed. And as the fleet aligned its engines, the void around them seemed to hold its breath. Back on Earth, deep in the underground chamber where the distress signal first sparked to life, Shadow Command studied the incoming data with growing tension, watching enemy signatures multiply like a spreading wound across the star map. The alien colony's defenses were breaking, shield lines flickering, evacuation routes collapsing under heavy fire, every second showing more red zones swallowing the cities. A young analyst stared at the images, her eyes burning with fear and fury as she whispered that they were running out of time, but the older officers beside her did not flinch. They had lived through humanity's darkest years, they had watched the galaxy dismiss their warnings, and now they were watching the same arrogance tear another world apart. Their hands tightened around the edges of the consoles, breaths deep and steady, waiting for the moment the Black Fleet would leave orbit. Then the tremor came, soft at first, a vibration running through the command room floor as the first warship engaged full burn, its engines igniting like silent stars. One by one, the rest followed, each ship vanishing into slipspace with a deep pulse that shook the stone walls, leaving behind only their ghostly afterimage on the tactical screens. A quiet fell over the chamber, heavy but strangely hopeful, as the officers watched the fleet's trajectory curve toward the distant planet like a blade drawn in the dark. For the first time since the distress signal arrived, someone dared to breathe out, whispering that maybe, just maybe, they could reach the colony before the last city fell. But as the fleet vanished into the void, a new symbol flickered on the screen, a hostile signature the analysts had never seen before, something older and far more dangerous moving toward the same world. End of Part 2. Ready for Part 3? The hostile signature on the screen pulsed like a heartbeat, slow and deep, as if something enormous was waking in the dark. Analysts leaned closer, their faces tightening as layers of data peeled back, each new reading stranger than the last, each number carrying the weight of a warning no one wanted to voice. The symbol didn't match any known empire, not the raiders crushing the alien colony, not the council fleets. Not even the ancient powers that slept beyond the rim. It felt older, heavier, like a shadow left behind by a forgotten war, a presence that moved with purpose rather than hunger. And as its trajectory locked onto the same burning world the Black Fleet raced toward, the entire command room fell into a tense, uneasy silence. High above Earth, the Black Fleet tore through slipspace with blinding speed, engines humming like deep storm winds, their hulls glowing faintly as reality bent around them. Inside the lead flagship, Admiral Rylan Ward stood at the center display, hands behind his back, eyes fixed on the holographic image of the colony world shrinking under fire. He had seen worlds fall before, had watched the Galactic Council vote for safety while others burned. But something about this moment felt different, heavier, as if the air itself carried an old echo he couldn't name. His crew moved with calm precision around him, their voices steady, their movements sharp, but even they felt the same strange weight pressing against their chests. Then the alert sounded, soft but sharp, announcing the new contact. Admiral Ward turned as the hostile symbol appeared on the fleet's main display, a dark red pulse slowly expanding like a wound across the stars. It wasn't the enemy already attacking the colony, it wasn't any force the fleet had ever trained for, it was something else entirely, something that glided through slipspace without distortion, something that ignored all scanning protocols as if the universe itself parted for it. A wave of unease swept through the bridge, quiet but unmistakable, a ripple of instinct older than technology telling them they were staring at something wrong. The Admiral leaned forward, studying the readings, and for the first time in years he felt a coldness settle in his stomach. Not fear, but recognition. Because hidden in the strange, ancient energy signature was a pattern he had seen only once before, in a classified human archive sealed so deeply that only a few officers in all of Earth's history had ever opened it. As the Black Fleet surged toward the dying world, Admiral Ward whispered the words no one expected to hear. "It's not just the colony in danger. Something is coming for us." The bridge lights dimmed as the data unfolded, line by line, across the flagship's main display, each fragment peeling back another layer of the mystery that had followed them through slipspace. Admiral Ward stood motionless, but inside him something cold tightened, because he knew exactly where he had seen that pattern before. Years ago, buried beneath mountains of classified archives, he'd studied the remnants of an ancient human project, one so dangerous and unpredictable that Earth vowed never to awaken it again. The record spoke of an encounter at the edge of known space, a silent object drifting between dying suns, carrying a signature older than every council species combined. Humanity had kept it secret, not out of fear, but out of responsibility, because no one truly understood what it was, or what it wanted. And now that same signature was racing toward the burning colony, drawn by something only the dying and the doomed ever seemed to trigger. On the colony world below, chaos swallowed the last safe sectors, the sky cracked open by constant bombardment, each explosion shaking dust from collapsed towers and sending fresh waves of fear through battered shelters. Families clung to one another beneath shattered ceilings, waiting for the final breach, waiting for the enemy to come through fire and smoke. But there was another feeling spreading through the panicked crowds, a strange pressure in the air, like the atmosphere itself was waiting for something unseen, something heavy, something watching. Soldiers at the perimeter felt it first, a hum that crawled across their armor, a vibration too deep to be mechanical, like a distant voice buried in the earth. They exchanged frightened looks, gripping their failing weapons, unsure whether the sensation meant help was coming, or something far worse. Back in the Black Fleet's command chamber, the crew watched the hostile signature with growing dread as it slowly gained on their position, closing the distance with impossible speed. Admiral Ward exhaled once, steadying his voice, ordering enhanced scans to pierce the distortion cloud orbiting the mysterious contact. The results hit the screens in sharp bursts, then froze, flashing a single human warning code across every console. No one spoke at first, their breath caught somewhere between disbelief and fear, eyes locked on the impossible message that echoed through the bridge. The object wasn't just following the fleet. It wasn't just hunting the colony. It was responding to something human. And before anyone could process that truth, a faint signal broke through the static. A human distress beacon that should not exist, broadcasting from deep inside the ancient entity's shadow. The bridge felt smaller as the forbidden beacon echoed through the speakers. A trembling human voice wrapped in static, barely audible but unmistakably real. The crew froze, every heartbeat slamming against their ribs, because no human should be in that place. No human beacon should come from inside an ancient, alien shadow that moved like a living storm. Admiral Ward stepped closer to the console, his reflection wavering in the glowing screen, his voice low as he ordered the signal to be isolated and cleared. The audio sharpened, crackling once, then twice, before a soft, broken whisper pushed through the distortion. A whisper filled with fear and something far heavier, pleading. If anyone hears this, it's awake. Please, don't let it reach the colony. The room went silent. Not the silence of confusion, but the silence of people who knew they had just crossed into something far bigger than rescue. The hostile entity accelerated again, bending slipspace around it, tearing through distorted light as if distance meant nothing. The Black Fleet strained against their engines, pushing to intercept, but the thing behind them moved with a speed no warship could match, a speed that felt unnatural, as though space itself dragged it forward. Admiral Ward's jaw tightened, his eyes locked on the red pulse closing in, his mind racing through history's darkest pages. He knew now, the ancient object humanity once studied had not been dead, not dormant, only waiting. And the dying colony's screams had awakened something inside it that should have slept forever. On the colony world, the atmosphere shifted again, the pressure dropping so fast entire crowds stumbled to their knees, hands to their heads, gasping as a low, bone-deep vibration rolled across the planet. Soldiers looked up in confusion as pieces of the sky rippled like water, stars bending and trembling as if reacting to something outside the laws of physics. Children cried as shadows stretched unnaturally across broken streets, long and sharp, pointing toward the horizon where distant clouds twisted into spirals. Even the enemy armada paused for a heartbeat, their ships drifting to a halt, their crews sensing a new presence, one they didn't understand and didn't dare ignore. Back aboard the flagship, Ward knew they had one chance left. He ordered all ships into attack formation, engines at maximum burn, weapons primed, shields flaring to life. The bridge shook as the fleet prepared to break slipspace and enter normal space right above the dying colony. Every officer braced themselves, knowing they were seconds away from facing an enemy older than the galaxy itself. And just as the fleet initiated the jump, the ancient shadow appeared in front of them, tearing open the void like a wound. The void split open with a soundless shockwave, light bending backward as the ancient entity emerged, its massive form stretching across the Black Fleet's path like a living eclipse. Every display on the flagship flickered in panic, sensors failing as the creature's presence crushed the space around them, warping gravity, bending time in small shivers. Admiral Ward stood firm, his hands gripping the rail, his voice steady even as every instinct screamed that this thing was not meant to exist. The ship trembled, lights dimming, the hull groaning under the pressure of something older than every star chart combined. And through the distortion, the human distress beacon continued to whisper, a voice trapped inside the monster's shadow, begging for release. Lock onto the beacon, Ward ordered, his voice quiet but sharp, a command forged from the deepest part of humanity's spine. The crew obeyed instantly, their fear swallowed by a fierce rising resolve, because if a human voice was still alive inside that nightmare, then there was no turning back. The Black Fleet surged forward, engines flaring white as they broke formation and dove straight toward the creature, their hulls cutting through distorted space with defiant precision. The enemy armada scattered in terror, their ships fleeing the unnatural presence, their war forgotten as the true threat eclipsed their purpose. For the first time since the attack began, the colony below looked up and saw hope, dark shapes streaking across the sky, followed by a thunder that felt like salvation. The ancient entity reacted, its shadow twisting toward the fleet, a wave of crushing force rolling from its core. But the Black Fleet held formation, every ship absorbing the blow with shields glowing like burning suns. Admiral Ward gave the final order, a simple line carried through every deck, every console, every heartbeat, free our own. With a force that shook the stars, the fleet released a coordinated barrage, not to destroy, but to carve open a path, to tear a seam in the creature's shell and reach the trapped beacon. Light ripped through the darkness, the monster recoiling as a narrow corridor of distorted space cracked open. Through that impossible opening, a single escape capsule tumbled free, scarred, melting, but intact. The capsule drifted toward the flagship, the ancient shadow collapsing behind it, folding back into the void as if retreating from humanity's fury. The colony below erupted in stunned cries, watching the impossible unfold above their broken world. As the pod was brought aboard, Ward stood waiting, breath tight, heart heavy, knowing the voice inside had changed everything. The hatch opened slowly, and a small, trembling hand reached out, gripping his sleeve with terrified strength. A child's voice whispered, "You came!" Admiral Ward bent to meet their eyes, his voice a soft promise carried through the silence. Humanity always comes. And in that moment, under the fractured light of a wounded sky, the galaxy finally understood why Earth's shadows were feared. and why they were loved. The rescue bay fell into a hush as the child was lifted gently from the escape capsule, their small frame wrapped in a thermal blanket, their breaths shallow but steady. Every officer who gathered around felt something tighten in their chest, not just relief, but a deeper ache, because this child had survived inside an ancient terror that should have crushed them long before the Black Fleet arrived. Admiral Ward knelt beside them, his eyes softening as the child clung to his sleeve the way someone clings to the last solid thing in a collapsing world. The ship's lights flickered faintly above them, a reminder that the entity had not fully vanished, its presence still echoing through the sensors like the fading steps of a giant walking away. But the moment the child whispered, "It followed us," the atmosphere shifted, growing colder, as if the words themselves opened a door no one wanted to see behind. The bridge summoned Ward immediately, and he rose with a steady breath, leaving the child in the care of medical officers, though their frightened eyes didn't leave him until the bulkheads closed. When he reached the command deck, the screens were alive with strange patterns, spirals of dark energy drifting through the void, marks left behind by the ancient entity as it retreated. The readings made no sense, no consistent physics, no stable signatures, as if the creature was made from the scars of old space rather than matter. Analysts whispered in tense voices, not just about the energy trails, but about the distress beacon that had been inside the monster. How did a human signal survive inside it? Why had it been broadcasting a warning instead of a call for rescue? And why did the child's genetic scan, now running on a dim side monitor, show anomalies the system couldn't categorize? Ward listened to every report, his pulse slow but heavy, his mind caught between dread and determination. Then another alert pulsed across the room, sharp enough to freeze every voice. A new transmission had been found, buried beneath the child's distress signal, hidden so deeply the systems didn't detect it until now. Ward ordered it on screen, and the display filled with a shaky, grainy video feed, the face of a human scientist staring into the camera, eyes desperate, background shaking violently as alarms wailed behind him. "This is Dr. Elias Cade, project lead of the Arc Echo Initiative. If you are seeing this, we failed. The creature isn't attacking. It's responding to us." The video shook harder, sparks flying behind him as a shadow loomed. It was created to protect something inside the child. Then the feed cut to black, and every eye on the bridge turned toward the medbay door, where the child had just begun to glow. The medbay felt too bright, too still, as if the ship itself was holding its breath while doctors and officers circled the glowing child with careful, trembling steps. The soft light rising from their skin wasn't harsh or violent, it was gentle, warm, almost like the glow of a star seen through morning fog. Yet everyone who looked at it felt the same tight fear coil in their stomach, because warmth should not feel this heavy, and beauty should not feel this dangerous. Admiral Ward entered quietly, his eyes adjusting to the glow, his heartbeat slowing as he saw the child sitting upright on the exam bed, staring at their own hands as if unsure whether they still belonged to them. The glow pulsed in time with their breaths, soft waves of light running across their arms like ripples on water. A doctor stepped beside Ward, whispering that the scans still couldn't define what was happening, that the genetic anomalies were growing, unfolding like a message written in the body instead of ink. Another officer added that the energy signature around the child matched the trails left by the ancient entity, not entirely the same, but woven together like two halves of something long separated. Ward's jaw tightened as he listened, absorbing every detail, but his attention never left the child, who now seemed lost between fear and something deeper, something they didn't yet understand. When the child finally looked up at him, their eyes shimmered with faint light, and Ward felt a shiver run through the room. "I didn't mean for it to follow," the child whispered, their voice trembling with guilt, each word sounding older than their years. "It was sleeping, inside the dark place. I only called for help. I didn't know it would wake up." Their hands shook as they spoke, light flickering brighter with every breath, and tears welled at the corners of their eyes, casting small beams across their cheeks. Ward stepped closer, lowering himself to their level, his voice steady and calm as he told them no child carries blame for surviving, no child awakens ancient nightmares by choice. But even as he spoke, he could see the fear behind their tears. Fear not of the entity, but of themselves. Before he could say more, the ship trembled, a deep vibration rolling through the decks, lights dimming as warning chimes echoed through the halls. Officers rushed in, breathless, reporting that the ancient entity had reversed course, accelerating straight toward the Black Fleet, no longer retreating, no longer drifting. It was coming for the child, and it was coming fast. Ward rose slowly, the glow reflecting in his eyes, and everyone in the medbay felt it at the same time. The calm was over. The storm had found them. Alarms tore through the ship like lightning, red lights sweeping across every corridor as the Black Fleet snapped into combat readiness, engines roaring to full burn. The ancient entity was no longer a distant shadow. It was a storm ripping open space itself, racing toward them with a hunger that bent gravity and shattered every sensor trying to read it. Admiral Ward burst onto the bridge as the view screens filled with a distortion so massive it pushed the stars aside, a swirling void of dark light twisting into a shape that felt both alive and enraged. Officers shouted readings, the ship shuddered, and the entire fleet shifted into defensive formation, their hulls glowing with the power of shields pushed far beyond safe limits. This was no longer a rescue mission. This was survival. Down in the med bay, the child's glow flared suddenly, light surging through the room like a heartbeat amplified by fear. They grabbed the edge of the bed, their breath sharp, their eyes widening with a terror that seemed to echo the creature closing in. "It's calling to me," they whispered, voice cracking as the floor vibrated beneath their feet. "It doesn't want to hurt anyone. It wants me back." The staff around them backed away instinctively, not out of fear of the child, but of the force rising inside them, a force that resonated with the same rhythm as the cosmic storm outside. On the bridge, Ward gave the order to fire warning volleys, and dozens of warships released blue-white beams into the void, carving through warped space. The blasts hit the entity's surface and vanished instantly, swallowed like drops into a bottomless ocean. Then the creature pushed closer, its presence flooding the ship in waves, consoles flickering, gravity twisting, the entire fleet groaning as if dragged toward a collapsing star. Ward planted his feet, gripping the armrest, yelling for all ships to hold formation no matter the pressure. The bridge shook so violently that officers clung to rails and consoles just to stay upright. A single message blinked through the chaos. A trembling text from the medbay: "The child is losing control." Ward's eyes widened. He opened a comm line and spoke with everything in him, voice cutting through alarms and metal screams. "Listen to me. Fight it. You're stronger than whatever made that thing." But before the child could answer, the entity struck. A colossal arm of dark energy slammed into the flagship, hurling it sideways, tearing open half its shields in a single blow. Sparks rained from the ceiling, bulkheads buckled, officers thrown across the deck as the ship spun through fractured space. And through the spinning chaos, the entity's true form finally emerged. A towering figure of shifting light and shadow, reaching for the child with a roar that shook the stars. The flagship rolled through fractured space, alarms crying out across every deck as the ancient entity's shadow reached toward the hull like a hand closing around a fragile flame. In the medbay, the child collapsed to their knees as the glow inside them flared dangerously bright, a rising storm of light that shook the air and made every metal surface hum. Doctors tried to steady them, but a wave of invisible force pushed everyone back, gently but firmly, as if the universe itself was drawing a circle around one small, trembling soul. Tears streamed down the child's face as they whispered that they didn't want anyone else to be hurt, that the creature wasn't angry. It was afraid, searching, desperate to reclaim what had been taken from it long ago. And as they looked toward the ceiling, toward the stars shaking in chaos above, something in their expression shifted from fear to choice. Admiral Ward fought to stay upright on the bridge, gripping the railing as the ship's shields flickered dangerously close to collapse. The entity towered above them now, a cosmic titan made of shadowed light, its form shifting like memories lost across time. Officers shouted readings, systems failed one by one, but through the chaos, Ward's eyes narrowed, not in fear, but in clarity. He understood. The scientist's message, the child's glow, the creature's relentless pursuit. They were all threads of the same story. This wasn't a monster hunting prey. This was a guardian trying to reclaim its charge. And the galaxy, in its fear and blind politics, had torn apart something it never understood. Ward opened the comm to the medbay, his voice steady despite the ship trembling around him. "If you can reach it, if you can talk to it, now is the time." The child lifted their glowing hands, fingers shaking as light spilled into the room like dawn breaking through storm clouds. They whispered a single word, soft, gentle, filled with a courage far bigger than their small frame. "Stop!" The light surged outward, passing through bulkheads and steel, through fractured space and the void beyond, reaching the ancient entity with a warmth that froze the battlefield in silence. The creature halted mid-strike, its shadow trembling, its fury dissolving into a low, shuddering pulse. Slowly, painfully, it lowered its arm, drawing back like a wounded giant recognizing its own lost heart. The glow around the child faded to a soft shimmer as the entity's enormous form folded into itself, collapsing into a calm sphere of dim light, and drifting away into the quiet dark. The Black Fleet steadied, engines humming weakly, officers staring in disbelief at the peaceful void where destruction had hovered moments before. In the med bay, the child collapsed safely into Ward's arms, exhaustion finally overtaking them. He held them close, voice barely above a whisper. "You saved us all." Outside the viewport, stars settled back into place, the storm fading, the colony world still shining below, scarred, shaken, but alive. Humanity had fought with strength, but in the end, it was mercy that won. And as the flagship drifted through the gentle light of a new dawn, Admiral Ward looked out into the vast, wounded galaxy and breathed a quiet promise carried on the wind of the universe. "We protect the lost, even when the stars turn away."